Fintech Chatter podcast, brought to you by Tier 1 People, the leaders in executive search for fintech ventures.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with fintech leaders for a bit of a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today's guest is Kristofer Rogers of Vault.io. Vault is building a world-first global real-time payment network to move money at lightning speed wherever you are. Chris is a long-time friend of the show, and he's joining me today to review what was a mind-boggling Singapore Fintech Festival. To give you some context on the scale of this event, there were 65,000 attendees with 3,400 policymakers and even royalty in attendance. There were 665 central banks, regulatory authorities, and government organizations represented at this event. And they had 5 zones for talent, emerging tech, ESG, regulation, and founders or investors. Chris, welcome back.
Oh, it's a great second only to having actually seen you in Singapore, my friend. It's so good to be back on the show and to download on what was a really fascinating week in Singapore, eh?
Yeah, it was incredible. So we're going to cover a lot of things today, but what was your, Kenny, you've had a few days now to kind of digest it and come off the sugar high. What's your kind of overall impression of Singapore Fintech Festival?
Well, I mean, just the way in which it was curated, like you were saying, those stats were, I believe, only a city-state like Singapore can pull that off. But I think just the way in which they connected the world, truly. Yeah. I mean, 134 different countries, all with a similar agenda, made for a really productive time. And you could feel that, you could vibe that, right? Just walking through the 6 aircraft hangars, that was the total footprint of the expo. So I think the overarching feeling of it was that genuine business was done. And just looking at the announcements in my inbox and in my Google feed, there was so much achieved or planned and consequently announced at the show that it just felt like a real sort of line in the sand to hopefully move forward in a better environment for fintech. So I actually left really positive. I was grateful to get home only to have decent coffee. Everything else I miss greatly.
I actually had some decent coffees, and I tell you that obviously there's loads of different coffee stands there. The DBS, big shout out to DBS Bank. Your coffee cart was amazing. Best, definitely best coffee by far.
I would suggest Oliver Wyman, who I believe are core banking and now AI, had a pretty decent barista there. So it's between the two, but that's where you'll find the Australian crowd, either at our pavilion or hunting for the best coffee.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned there were 6 aircraft hangars. Like, to put this scale of this event into context. Yeah. I did a step count, and I think it was I would have done about 30,000 steps in that first day, just kind of walking from one end to the other and one end and back. It has to be, about a kilometer long, right? Like the whole thing.
At least. And look, I'm on a health tip recently, and so the 10,000 steps are very important, and you're right. I tripled that. And when you schedule meetings and go to where they'll see you, you suddenly find yourself having to do that hall 6 to hall 3 trek in high speed to get there on time. So as everyone listening or watching today will get that, to bring it to scale, that is just huge. It's right by the airport in Singapore and probably just as big as said airport. So you're doing the runway. It's like a fintech fashion show.
Yeah, incredible. This was your first time, is that right, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, it was.
What were you expecting before going into it?
Well, look, it's certainly not my first time in Singapore. I was fortunate to run a business out of Singapore for 4 years, so I get what Singapore is like at achieving anything. So my expectations were met. But look, I'm an aficionado of Money 2020. I've done Vegas, I've done Europe, I've done Asia. And so for me, there's a benchmark there. And it was actually superseded in that the delegations that were represented. And whilst it didn't have the kind of tech you'd expect at some shows,
Yeah,
finding your way through to people and being accessible to others was just easy. So
yeah,
I felt retargeted throughout the city with signage for the festival, with events happening, with people staying at my hotel, with people at the airport. It just felt like the entire country had a week of fintech. Even my
yeah,
Grab driver knew about fintech. He was a day
yeah.
trader and was asking me for some inside tracks around the Tunes and Gcash announcement at the Fintech Festival. So can you imagine? Really astute, smart people doing business. That's what happened.
Now, I'm not a big fan of these kind of sessions that you get at these events. I usually just hang in the hallways and kind of have chats to people like yourself. But I totally changed my tune at this
Yeah.
event. There was some incredible, speakers. So, Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, watched her
Yeah.
talk twice. I actually sat in on a discussion with the head of the Central Bank of Thailand, like just an incredibly articulate, smart,
Yes.
humble like person. But what really struck me is, kind of usually when you have people of that caliber and of that import, they're on defensive mode, right? They're not going to share
Yeah.
anything. Everything they're doing is gravy, right? Like we're good. And what really struck me was just how everybody was so open to saying, look, we don't have the answers. We've tried this, it's not worked. We've tried something else, it's a bit better, right? But things are moving that fast. It's that complex. We don't have the answers. We're kind of, yeah, that's why we're here, right? We kind of, so there was
Yeah.
this kind of real sense of what I felt was, I think kind of one was humility. There was no hubris there. Like that's the other thing that really
Mm.
struck me. Like there's kind of nobody out there, giving the big I am about, hey, we're, solving world hunger through the blockchain or, the usual crap. And even kind of Queen Maxima, who's the UN envoy for um, financial inclusion, like she was really honest about, hey, look, maybe we've got it wrong about financial inclusion, and that's not the bigger problem, right? And the bigger problem being financial health, which impacts
Yes.
everybody globally, not just kind of 1% of the global population. So that was the thing that really kind of struck me, was one, just like the intellect level of people, but then that, kind of openness, right? That you just don't see it on these panels.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I wanted to ask you about Her Royal Highness Queen Maxima, because not paying you lip service, but I enjoyed your daily downloads because you were there for business, but also there as a press attaché and really diving deep into the content. And you're absolutely right. It felt like fintech has become a global commodity
Mm,
in which geolocations and countries are genuinely interested in. That's what I felt. Now,
yeah,
usually it's oil and gas, minerals, gold, but it's become a commodity that the 134 countries and the various delegations that arrived in Singapore for this were genuinely wanting to win. They
mm,
wanted to attract fintech into their arena. And I found, I mean, it's taking it a slightly different direction than your comment, which I think is gold. I grew up in Africa and financial inclusion was all the rage, and that's what got
yeah,
me into fintech in the first place. But financial literacy and well-being post-pandemic have become the
yeah,
true barometer of economic turnaround. And so, yes, you're right. On reflection, those people, the Prime Minister, not of Australia, but of Singapore, the delegations walked through the room and blink and you could have missed them. There was no pomp and ceremony. We were all in the same conversation. So that's a really cool thing for you to point out.
Yeah.
And something I don't think you'd find anywhere else. They'd want to be in the VIP room and only be seen for their session and be, hustled away. But that was certainly not the case.
Yeah.
There were people I recognized, almost fan crush over, that are there, and you can reach out and touch them and talk to them.
Yeah.
So, no, very, very cool point to be made, Dexter.
Yeah. Now, you just mentioned something that I want to cover as well. So there was a significant, I guess, global event whilst we were there at the festival, as in the US election. Mixed reactions. I was sitting in the press room and the crypto bros were giddy with excitement that Trump was winning, and they're looking at their bags and getting excited. And then there were other people that I was talking to who were, kind of in serious kind of policy and kind of geopolitics has a massive impact on their business, who were concerned, right? And to your point about, I guess, the financial inclusion piece in Africa, it always astounds me that we have people from the US kind of all pomp about, how we're going to solve financial inclusion in Africa when they're still paying people by check, right? Are you for real, right? And so kind of, I think what's really struck me is, could we also be witnessing the beginning of a shift in the world order? And I don't want to get deep and esoteric, but some things really stuck out to me whilst I was there. Africa, in the next 20 years, is going to have a population of 2 billion people.
Yeah.
They're pretty advanced on payments, right? Like, payments ain't an issue, right? India, right? Population of what, 1 billion? Southeast Asia, population of 650 million.
Yeah.
Why are we getting obsessed about trying to break into the US? And on our doorstep, we have got, right? I haven't even mentioned China, right? But look at those opportunities, right? Like, and I haven't talked about the Middle East, right? Like, you look at what's happening in the Middle East. There's so much that is going on outside of the US. And I think that was the other thing that Singapore Fintech Festival always does to me, is to give me a reset to go, okay, what's possible? Where are the opportunities? What's actually happening? And I think to your point earlier, Chris, like, that is, I think, the secret sauce to Singapore Fintech Festival is they concentrate the world into that, small city state.
That's true. And, I deliberately called it a city state because it's ultimately so impressive at how hard they punch, in terms of at a global scale, from investments and infrastructure. But what you've just said is profound. I was walking around going la 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 when Sky News was on in the background. I didn't put the news on in the evening at my hotel because I knew what had happened. But it was very tangible on the ground, and maybe that was why it was arguably a more sober environment this year, because there are significant macroeconomic things happening that will impact us and other sectors significantly in the short, medium, and long term. And you're right, crypto bros were probably refreshing their portfolio and just seeing the markup on Bitcoin, right? Because a lot of posturing was around that. But I mean, jokes aside, what just resonated with me with what you said, and I think is true, and I don't know how to express this, but you're right, checks are still used in America, yet we still idealize the business achievements of that experiment that is the USA. And I think it's because San Francisco is such a holy land for fintech. So much was scaled and achieved through that hub that we almost have this, what I call love bite loyalty for these amazing American startups. Now, then go to Africa. Now, I've been studying a health tech recently, and I looked at the median age. Bear with me, this is an important point, of Western economies. The median age, i.e. as many above and below, is around late 40s, early 50s. Right? We're aging. Yet you look at Africa, and you look at APAC, and actually the median age is in some instances under 20.
Wow.
Which means, exactly, Africa specifically, East
Yeah.
Africa, the median age by 2030 will be about 23. Now, that presents a whole different world of opportunity, perhaps not in aged care, but in fintech and economics and banking. And that is why M-Pesa in Kenya became such an incredible success story. And I think even across APAC, they're doing away with fossil fuels before even using them and going for nuclear or renewable, because they have a generational opportunity to adopt new technology. And I think you could say the same of financial technology, in that they have an opportunity that they never embraced card. They're non-carded. Some of them are non-banked. And therefore, they're looking at alt-fi and different ways of doing business as a legitimate first-generation opportunity. So guys, just think about that how important suddenly real-time payments and blockchain and stable coins and all of these things have become, because they are greenfield opportunities in the areas you just spoke of, Dexter. In the States, no, a lot of Aussie fintechs have failed to launch. They said, we're going to America, and they didn't. Vault, we're in 31 countries, the SEPA countries, UK, Brazil, Australia now. We are looking at the States, but it's not a priority right now. We're genuinely excited around APAC because there's so much potential and interoperability, to use a buzzword. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. It's like a whole new frontier.
We got to do more of these things, right? Because you said the magic word that I was just about to lead into, right?
No, what was it?
Right, and it's interoperability, right? And I think that is the word that has replaced the other I word, innovation. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't see anything technology-wise at Singapore Fintech Festival that was mind-blowing.
No.
And I think that's actually a good thing, because all of the conversations weren't about let's just build more shit and get excited and bells and whistles. It was, how are we going to make all of this work, right?
Yeah.
Technology now isn't the problem.
Yeah.
Making it work and infrastructure, and how does this kind of new way look from a regulatory perspective, from a compliance perspective, from an interoperability perspective, from a global perspective. And I think this was kind of, when you hear the rhetoric coming out of the US, like, you just think, are you guys insane? Like, putting up these walls, like, when the rest of the world is going, hey, we got to create a new. And it was really interesting, right? Because I think what it did was it gave a really kind of stark kind of example as to, I think, what is one of the key issues of fintech here in Australia. And that is that everybody's looking for ownership, right? And building their moat and their fence, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's defensive, whether you're a regulator, a big four bank, an investor, an industry body, everybody's trying to protect their patch.
Yeah.
Whereas in Singapore, you pointed this out earlier, right? Everybody wants to talk. People collaborate. People help. Regulators go to fintechs and banks and say, what are you doing with AI?
Yeah.
How can you help us, like, help you and get up to speed? Like, they had I don't know if you've seen it, Singapore Fintech Festival. They had a regulator zone.
I saw it.
Past and I took a video and I went, that place, it was the first day, right? So just doors had just opened. I was like, I can't see that place being busy. I walked past at 12 p.m. 2 hours later. It was rammed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was like standing room only, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of where, again, I see this, what I see is the possibilities of, hey, let's stop, kind of just building stuff and kind of trying to be, kind of innovators. Like, innovation isn't just about breakthrough technology. It's about how you actually apply that and create better systems and processes and more efficient systems. And I definitely got the sense, even the AI stuff that I was seeing was kind of all chat, all process improvement, very little generative, stuff that was there.
You've made about 3 points there I desperately want to talk to. I guess the most innovative thing I saw in Singapore was the robot delivering clean towels to the hotel room. I thought, damn, that's good. I want one. But with the innovation, you're absolutely right. AI, we're all looking for a use case where it is genuinely valuable. And in banking, it's speed to yes, it's chat. It's not this harebrained idea that people speak of and scare us with. But the innovation, you're right, was not next level, and nor did it need to be. My theme was connecting the dots.
Yeah.
By that, I mean, I've got a problem. I want to connect the right people in this room, so I solve for that problem. I'm niche. I do one thing, whether that's AML and KYB, or whether that's payments processing, or whether it's stored value ledger. And there's this fresh new appetite for all of us and your banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, all the big guys were there, to work together, collaborate to solve for a problem. And that tended to be cross-border settlement in a wallet environment that regulators will approve. And so, and for me, in a payments perspective, I was looking to solve for that and found many ways in which to do that. You made a point about Australia. Gosh, when we founded Split Payments, now Zepto, the 4 founders, I was the initial CEO, we were in a room with the banks and it was hostile. There was friction. There was this whole idea of disruption, and that has changed. Look, Australia is still a hard nut to crack. We're still very risk averse, and the new sort of framework around Australia Payments Plus is hard. But there is a new appetite, even in Australia, but genuinely in Singapore, to connect the dots and work together, take stakes, not be scared, because we all do what we do particularly well. And I think technology's enabled that conversation too, because we can all now ingest APIs, for example. So the idea of working together has finally become genuinely interoperable, right? Even 5 years ago, big financial institutions didn't even have API capabilities. So, even let's be geeks for a moment, the tech's changed, and that's changed the conversation.
I was there for business as well, not just doing kind of podcasty stuff. And one of the things that really kind of struck me was when you were last on the show, we did a predictions piece for 2023, and you came up and you said the big thing for 2023 will be embedded finance. And I said, hey, hang on a second, Chris.
You disagreed.
I'm not so sure.
That's right.
And it's why I disagreed wasn't because I didn't believe in the premise of embedded finance, but I just didn't believe that what I was seeing out there, I think what they were doing was they were massively underestimating how complex and difficult it is to fix embedded finance, right? And so, you can go and have a conversation and say to a big bank, hey, what if we help you with a revenue stream here? And they go, yeah, that's great. It doesn't cost us anything. And then you have to go and build the thing, right? And building the thing is like the bit that, and what's happened as a result, right? So this last 2 years, every conversation that I've had with anybody who's been in a partnership with a large corporate on an embedded finance payments scheme, they've all had the same problems. We can't get anywhere near the commercial value that we thought we would get through the partnership. We can't get buy-in. Right? There's loads of roadblocks and hurdles internally. So it was really, I guess, heartening when I was in Singapore to spend some time with Wise and their platform and see the stuff that they're doing, right? So, they kind of, I guess an example here would be they've partnered with Upbank, and in the Up app, I can go and spend overseas, and it's basically Wise working in the background. But see, Wise have now got a new bank. They announced Standard Chartered there as well. I think, first of all, I want to say you were right. So was I, right?
Can I pause for a second there, Dexter? I didn't catch what you said there.
I said you were right. You were right, Chris. Yeah.
Well, there's a glitch. I didn't hear that.
Yeah, your prediction was right, Chris. I guess, I was right to an extent. So I think what we need to take from that is that, progress is inevitable. What you can achieve. We often overestimate what we can achieve in a year and vastly underestimate what we can achieve in a decade. So I think that was kind of a really good example. But I think it is now the time for embedded finance. I think, if I look at Wise Platform, they've spent 5 years building that thing.
That's right.
300 and odd people to build it and service it. It's not something where a couple of guys from Bondi can rock up and go, "Hey, we got a solution for you." And I think what's kind of really struck me is, is the maturity now of fintech. We've obviously seen some kind of not so great things happen in the embedded finance and banking as a service space, particularly in the US. We've seen some businesses fail in that first iteration. And I think what we're now seeing is, hey, we've learned the lessons. We've found the kind of blueprint for success. How, what is by first of all getting the value offering right, and then I guess building something that is just way too difficult for a bank and expensive for a bank to build themselves.
And finding the right bank that has the appetite to collaborate. And I think we've touched on that a few times in this chat, that they are there, and they were there at the festival. Look,
interestingly, Australia's big 4 banks weren't there. Right?
No, couldn't find them. So if you're listening, let's hook up next year.
You got to be there next year, people. Right? Like you just, I did see some people incognito. At the event, and I'm pretty confident, having spoken to them at the airport on the way back, that they'll be saying, "We got to be there next year," right? Like,
I have to say, actually, I was in the Indian food zone in Hall 6, having a meeting with an amazing company, PayGlocal, actually Indian, who are on the rails in India, but are looking to connect globally with payments processing. That's not the story here. We had a great meeting. I pitched Vault. But then the gentleman on the table beside me took me aside after. He was actually the CIO of one of the big 4 banks, the institutional part of said bank. And he said, "God, I loved listening to that pitch. Do you know how difficult it is for us to have that kind of conversation? But it's a conversation we want to have." So you're right. I think everyone was there, just not with a pop-up stand or a grandstand in Hall 6 like your big Asian or American banks. So it's there. But look, it's super interesting, and I could talk all day about this and about where embedded has become. The one thing I will say is, I think fintechs look at the hyperscaled unicorns and set that as the Northern Star. And a lot of them get to a hyperscale in the short term, but then fail because they don't know how to level that plane and keep climbing. And I think they've set their expectations wrongly, because they think 6 to 9 months, then exit. And the success stories here, like Airwallex, and are thinking, 24 months, 36. And in between now and then, it's the responsibility of my teams to have the short vision and deliver revenue. So, and those are the ones I'm seeing succeed now, because they were able to have the industrial strength and maturity, the compliance tick box, all of those prudential standards, and then they can continue to innovate. So that's really cool. And you're right, it's not probably the story everyone wants to hear. They just want to have that Uber success or Afterpay success. But even with them, it took a bit of a road before they could really celebrate that ultimate.
And look, I kind of think this is one of the issues that we're seeing currently with the US, right? Is that you have people who, they've been very successful by creating chaos, right? Like, you can create chaos in the taxi system, right? But when you create chaos in the financial system, that has much, much deeper, broader implications.
And disruption is a whole new meaning.
Exactly. And you know what? You might personally benefit, but guess what? The world's burning around you, and you're going to make a lot of enemies. And I think this was kind of, again, the kind of stark contrast, which was, kind of precision, deliberate steps, recognizing that there are big, bold, complex problems, bringing in, super intelligent people who do apply first principles thinking and are open-minded and look at different ways to solve problems. But they do it with the guardrails of, kind of, unlike the Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things.
Can I ask you a question?
Move fast with precision.
Well, let me ask you a business question now then, selfishly. So obviously you're in the recruitment business and you're at an executive level. So has who you look for in leadership amongst fintechs changed dramatically over this recent past that we're sort of framing around the festival? Like, are you looking for an entirely different skill set now, or are you returning to something? What's the
No,
goal?
I think the challenge is, and the challenge always will be, and a great example is again, what we're seeing in the US. I think what Elon Musk has done is incredible, right?
Mhm.
But putting startup people into government is a recipe for disaster, as equally as putting government people straight into a startup is a recipe for disaster, right? Like, so we all say, hey, look, you hire somebody from big corporate or government, they haven't got a clue in startup. Well, the same is, the other way around as well. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, it hasn't really changed, right? Because the reality is that you kind of have to pick people for the stage of business that you're at and where you're looking to head to.
Yes.
And people have different qualities that are required for that. Where there is a shift is that as we see more businesses on that plateau piece that you talked about before, where you've gone through the super scale and now it's like, okay, we're turning into an enterprise. What does
Yep.
that mean? You have different people that are required there. And that's really what I'd say in the last 2 years I've been doing a lot more of as we've seen businesses start to mature.
Yeah.
Is you kind of have to have people like still have that startup mentality, kind of outcome driven, have all of those qualities, but can operate in a space that decisions don't happen as fast. You have a more defined role. You don't get to do everything,
You
right?
have
You get to do
structure.
your
Yeah.
structure, right?
Mm.
And I think that is the challenge, for the fintech industry moving forward. And I was really heartened to see that one of the five major zones was talent.
Yes. That's
I
true.
go to I go to events, fintech events, and they all talk about talent, 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 and there's never any discussions around talent at
Yeah.
events.
And of all the stages, that's one I lingered around because there
Yeah,
were good panels
yeah,
talking about culture, talking about scaling in the right way, talking about founder-led, moving across that tipping point to
yeah,
to leadership-led. So you're right that actually now we unpack this, a key thread throughout the week, right? That it was all about the people and scaling as much as it was
yeah,
about the technology and innovation, right?
yeah. And look, I think one of the things that was abundantly clear to me is that fintech as an industry is still attracting highly talented people,
Mm,
right? Like the
yeah.
caliber of people that I met with, just everybody else.
Yeah.
Kind of, I was in awe of just their, level of intellect, education, how they present themselves,
Yeah.
their experiences, and I think this is the thing that you see a lot more of in a place like Singapore is people, I caught up with Joel Yarborough who, like, I mean, unfortunately,
Great
the
money.
podcast we recorded at the event had some audio issues, so we're going to do another recording, right?
I saw
So
you sort of tease that. That's a
yeah,
shame.
yeah. Look, and look, this is a guy who, was at PayPal, you
Yeah.
know, went to Grab, was one of the early employees and built the super app of super apps, right?
Yeah.
He's gone to Rapid, and now he's in the Middle East. So this guy has built businesses across 4 different continents,
That's right. And
right? And
was he just
started his
looking
career
African?
in banking.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what you've got is, for me, kind of the complete kind of person for
Yeah.
fintech, right? Like if you're gonna start to take it from one to 10,000, like
Yes.
there's just very few people who have that type of experience.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
what you find is when you meet these people is how grounded and humble
Yes.
and balanced they are. And also how accessible they are. I think that's the thing I just keep,
Yeah.
we've talked about this a lot. It's about Singapore Fintech Festival, but people are just so accessible.
Yeah. And I don't know Joel like you do, but again, over a food counter, we struck up a conversation because she
Mate,
knew
I
it.
just met him. I was like a fanboy from afar, and I
Oh,
just
great.
got introduced to him and said, "Hey, Joel, it's kind of I know all these people. Everybody speaks so highly of you. I'd
Yeah,
love for
yeah.
you to be on the podcast. And so,
Well,
we
that's
did
how you
that,
do
not
it.
really knowing each other, but you have a 30, 45-minute conversation with someone. And it's one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast, right? It's kind of like just,
Because
I
you can
get
connect.
this,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you just get to connect with somebody
But to your
one-on-one.
point about accessibility, we identified within 3 minutes that there was an African project he's working on, right? And my
Yeah,
background in Kenya, and therefore it was reason enough to swap notes and contacts.
yeah,
So it just happens like that. And again, to your point, people are unassuming. We all were wearing the fintech gear, which is t-shirt and jeans,
yeah,
right? And in some instances, not even shoes, and we'll get to that.
yeah,
And it's very smart people
yeah,
walking around the city state with no shoes. But these guys are, guys and girls are ultimately impressive, but they don't need to be. They don't need to impress
yeah,
you. They want to learn and know, and they still have that hunger. So yeah, again, I think that's something that was so impressive about the show.
yeah.
That the delegates there came for one reason, not pomp and ceremony, not look
Yeah.
at me, I'm the keynote. It was more like let's talk.
So we're going to come on to what you talked about now. So one of the other things that I think, we're talking about talent, there's actually some amazing Aussie talent expats living in Singapore.
Yes.
And when I first went in 2019, knowing some of those people and, having been part of my network for a while, said, hey, we have a meetup, we've got one at Singapore Fintech Festival. Come along.
Yes.
We go to the markets. We have Saturday. We talk fintech and just blabble shit, right? So, and so at that event, we kind of came up, myself and a fellow Aussie, Renee Michaud, decided to have a competition where we would see who had the shiniest head in fintech. And I am very, very, very pleased to announce that the tradition continues. And this year we had a record turnout, yourself included, Chris, where I think there were 8 finalists who all competed to see who had the shiniest head. Yet again, Rene won. I have some theories about why he wasn't wearing shoes, because I think that there was a light reflection, kind of positive net effect for Rene by not wearing shoes, which I think we might need to go to adjudicators on.
I agree.
But look, what was, I invited you along to that, Chris. What was your kind of, impression of the night?
Oh, you did. And look, had you not invited me, I'd be none the wiser. And I walked in thinking my cranium could be sighted from space. So I thought I could take out the top prize. But Lao Pao markets, I think is called, the food markets there, which are famous, reasonably late at night in balmy 31-degree heat, sweating over a cold beer and some satay. It's what Singapore experience should be. And then to have a long table with everybody from the festival and the Australian diaspora, who are now in amazing jobs with the banks and fintechs and doing cutting edge stuff in AI. It was electric. And just to be a finalist and to bow down on that photo was a joy in and of itself. And I think it's important to have the discussions and then the downloads. And like you said at the top of this conversation, of this episode, this was less about partying and networking drinks. It was more about business, right? And it was. But the events I went to also were genuinely celebratory and enjoyable and different to ones you would expect at the sidelines of other comparable large conferences where it just gets messy.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was rich culture, which was amazing.
Now I want to move on because clearly, right, we've got a term in Australia for fintech where we keep convincing ourselves that we're punching above our weight. And I got to say, look, this isn't to be dismissive, but what I witnessed last week was punching above your weight. And I think, what I'll kind of will say is that we have, as I mentioned, some of the best talent, without a doubt. I think we've got some of the greatest founders. Afterpay, these are businesses that have been built despite big four banks, investors, regulators, right? Like now, if you look at Singapore, right, like they've got this big, bold vision of being the world's greatest smart city state.
That's
Fintech
right.
is a key part of that. You've then got the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is essentially a combined regulatory and central bank that runs the festival, that invests, that invites everybody to come be part of it. It's aligned to a long-term strategic goal of the government. The government's stable. And so what you have, is a nation of 5 million people
Yes.
truly, truly punching above its weight, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? Kind of, because we're not gonna get that type of change overnight. But what do you think are the things that Australia can start doing now that will at least set us on the path to being a nation that can truly compete, and will punch above its weight?
Wow. Look, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I mean, to frame what you've just said, I saw a great release that over the past 10 months, 2024, there's been $1.4 billion raised in fintech, right? Across APAC. But
Yeah,
Singapore accounted for 53% of those
yeah,
funds raised. And I think it's because, like you said, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, they curated the show.
yeah,
And so I do see green shoots of consulting from RBA in Australia. I do see green shoots of banks increasingly open to partnerships, but it's all half-assed
yeah,
right now. And we've got to get beyond that regulatory timidness and
mm,
have the government lead like Austrade do in other
yeah,
markets.
yeah,
They're hungry over in Singapore, over in the
yeah,
States to bring businesses into Australia. Can we not be more hungry at incubating businesses here and helping us Trojan? And I don't quite see them operating at a level that
yeah,
Singapore do. Even governments like Malaysia. I mean, I did a raise for a fintech in Malaysia in 2013 of $1 million, but that was from the government.
yeah,
And so it's easier. It's still hard. And like I said, I don't think I have an answer for you, mate. And I'd love to know what the audience are thinking. Maybe we can put something out because
yeah,
it's got to change seismically, and it's not pretty yet. We are turning around. We are beginning to see capital trickle in again, but
mm,
it just is dwarfed by
yeah,
Singapore just being the hub. And it makes it easy. I could go there tomorrow and get a tax benefit, put it that way.
yeah. And look, I think one of the frustrations that I've got, Chris, is I've put a lot of content out over the last year and a half, kind of raising alarm bells to say,
Hmm.
look, we're back where we are 2017. Like, you know,
Yeah.
we have to, like, everybody has to acknowledge this, and what are we going to do to get out of it? And I think what struck me was first Singapore Fintech Festival I went to was 2019. And it was great this time to go and see Austrade had a strong presence,
Yeah.
a number of organizations out. To contrast that to 2019, they had a pull-up banner and one person dishing out leaflets.
Okay.
And
Change is
I
good.
remember Senator Jane Hume, or Senator at the time, who was also Minister for Fintech, when we had a Minister for Fintech, came out and I think was absolutely shocked at the size and scale of what was going on. And equally at the same time, dismayed at how flippant, you know, Australia was treating this, and particularly
There you
government.
go.
And yeah, and she did like an amazing job of just trying to at least kind of bring some energy to it and go out and speak with people. And I managed to, did speak to her at that event as well. And, kind of whatever criticisms you want to have of government, I think, we did start to get some momentum,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's
which has
true.
been lost under this current government. And it kind of seems that, kind of it's constantly either a them or us, or, one party has to suffer
Hmm.
was the other. One of the things that I think we can need to do as a nation is to have a longer term vision.
Yeah.
So, like, who do we want to be? Now, when it comes to fintech, I think we probably need to pick and say, who do we want to be?
Yeah.
Do we want to be the innovation hub for payments? Do we want to be, the innovation hub for digital assets? Like, what is the thing that we're going to be most known for, and how do we push that? Because at the minute, I think, and this isn't a criticism of the industry bodies, I think, but if you look at FinTech Australia, they got so many different agendas that they're trying to cater for without the resources of mass, right? Like, it's a member body, and they've 1 minute it's CDR, next it's digital assets, next thing it's like kind of pay ID, next it's this, then it's that, then it's lending, then it's buy now pay later, and you just don't have the resources to be able to have a dialogue and push through policy.
I mean, reflecting on what you're saying, Dexter, and thinking sort of helicopter for a second beyond the fin part of fintech, we're particularly good as a nation at technology innovation in health, in science, and a body like the CSIRO, once upon a time dabbled in open banking. They created the framework through Data 61. Maybe the government needs to step up on harnessing technology in which fintech has a place. Or maybe we should do an Elon Musk, and you and I, the Ponds in the room, should maybe do a government efficiencies and fintechs body and see if we can.
Mate, I can think of way better qualified people than myself to do that.
Yeah, that's true, mate. That's true.
Right now, I want to end on a really optimistic mode because, like, the reality is, I am super pumped about 2025. I'm super pumped about the future for Australian fintech. It has been a tough 2 years, mate, no doubt about it. But there are definitely green shoots, and I guess I've got some ideas of what's got me excited, but I'd love to hear about what you're optimistic for next year, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, taking it from Singapore Fintech Festival out, I left the building or the country, probably with 9 genuine challenges to solve for. And by challenges to solve for, I mean commercial opportunities, right? And I'm, obviously now representing Volt in Australia, which is a truly global account-to-account player. But what I've left that room with is actually genuine Australian business opportunities to connect some global brands with the local market. So it says to me, there's global brands and processors genuinely interested in Australia. So it still is uniquely a highly coveted market in which people want to operate. Surprisingly for me, but it is. So I am genuinely excited that we have now crossed the threshold of downturn, and we will see those green shoots grow to beyond just little sprouts. I know there's an appetite to do business, and spruiking something like this festival for people to consider it later on. I just want to double down on that statement that I have got a pipeline off the back of that festival that is business in Australia. So that's really cool. And it also, the last thing I'll say, Dexter, because I'm really keen to think what you think, because ultimately I'll be right. No, we're not doing forecasting here, are we?
No, let's do it, right? Like, mate, we should have another. We'll have like a Shine Awards, but for forecasts.
Yeah, look, the connecting the dots bit I said, right? Obviously, one of the holy grail solutions here is cross-border, but with that comes complexities here where there is business to be done. Regulatory, reg tech, onboarding, AML, safe transfer of money, view of customer, ledger, stored value wallet, all of these businesses that are listening today, they play a part in one of those big fixes, which is moving money between multiple geo locations. And you mentioned Wise have solved for it in a way, but really an open source way in which we can do that business, I think, is coming. I don't know what I mean by open source, but hang that word on me and let's see if that comes into fruition.
No, look, I think it's absolutely true. And, there was I think one of the things that Singapore has made itself clear about is their big support of digital assets. I think the talk was very much around CBDCs and digital trade, trade finance, and you look at the numbers that are, kind of going through. And I was in one of the talks, and Dante from Circle USDC talked about the volume that they've done since they launched, and It was a great panel, by the way, and kind of, you know, three different people, all with slightly different views. And Uma from JP Morgan kind of laughed and said, "We do that volume in a day, right? Like, we're talking like trillions of dollars, right?" And it's like, we do that volume in a day, right? And so, yeah, whilst it's all very exciting and everybody's looking for solutions, we're going to have some scalability challenges. We're going to have, you know, some teething problems. And I think, you know, just like you, I walked away from that event with leads and opportunities of international businesses wanting to do business in Australia.
That's correct.
And that was anywhere from a startup through to a major bank. And so I think there's absolutely kind of renewed interest. And there was a stat that really threw me, which is in terms of outbound remittance, Australia is number 5 in the world.
Wow.
Ahead of the US.
You know, I'm not surprised, because the numbers being thrown at me by some of the people there at the festival looking to do a better job of reconciling money out of Australia, it was in the billions per month of value. So I'm surprised, but not surprised, that we, to use your word, do punch above our weight.
Yeah.
In some regards. But what you just said, I think, is the best prediction. Currently, global trade is on the whole pinned to the US dollar. I predict in the short to medium term, a lot of digital trade globally will be pinned to something else.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's stable or central, it will be, I think, a blockchain play. And I know we've been speaking about that for years, but this is its time, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the key takeaway that I came away with was it's now time, right? And I think we're going to see some fundamental disruptive shifts over this next decade, which, you know, it's going to take decades to play out. But I think we're now it's kind of, this is real fintech, right? This isn't us digitizing and clipping the ticket through efficiency. This is changing the fundamental infrastructure and way in which value is exchanged.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I will drop your mic, sir.
Awesome. Chris, where can people find out more about Vault or get in touch with you if they're interested in finding out about the Vault solution?
Well, thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. I think when you course corrected at the beginning, Vault Bank in Australia, we'll know Vault Bank.
Mate, you've just created another edit for me now.
I think, thanks for the shout out. Look, vaults.io is where you'll see everything. I think they're pretty unique, and I say that because I'm with them now as senior vice president, but 32 countries operating A2A rails. There's very few other people that can do that. So I'm genuinely excited to have conversations with Australian startups, globals wanting to interoperate all of those domestic markets. So it's really cool. But of course, everyone can find me on LinkedIn. And as you know, Dexter, I'm always open to have chats, thought leadership, learn. So really genuinely just want to connect with more people as this momentum builds. But I appreciate the shout out, my friend.
Awesome. As always, folks, you can catch me on LinkedIn. If you're new to the show, make sure that you give us a follow on your favorite podcast player. You can also check us out on Fintech Chatter TV over on YouTube. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support, and please consider sharing this show on your social networks. Until the next episode, keep well.